introduce myself. Most of you have already met me, I think, but I don't know for sure. So I am Debbie Sauber, and I'm the branch manager for the Safe and Supportive Schools branch at the Division of Student Success within the Kentucky Department of Education. So we're here today to talk about the PBIS ISF contract moving forward with some of you guys. And so we have our PBIS ISF consultants, and we have Katie and Kelly here from Midwest PBIS. And let me give my division director, Christina Weiner, a moment to introduce herself, just in case you have not met her.
Good morning, everyone. I think you've received some emails from me, but I don't know if I've met all of you in person. I don't think I have, actually. So it's nice to meet you virtually, and we're really excited about this opportunity. And we're so glad that you're here with us to learn more about the plans for the work with Midwest PBIS and how we can engage you in supporting that work with the districts in your regions. So I'll keep it brief because I know Kelly and Katie have a lot of great information to share, and I know that you all may have some questions that we want to make sure that we have plenty of time to get to. So thank you, Debbie.
I always forget to unmute myself again. Kelly, would you like to introduce yourself, you and Katie, and then you can take it away. You're muted too, Kelly. Katie, do you want to go ahead? Looks like she might be having some issues.
Yes, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Perfect. Okay, good, because otherwise it wasn't saying I was muted and I was going to be a little nervous. Good morning, I'm Katie Coleman. I'm with the Midwest PBIS Network, and I am a Technical Assistance Director and one of the leads with Kelly on the mental health integration work, and have been with PBIS, either Illinois or Midwest, for almost 10 years now.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, thank you. I forgot, for some reason, when I joined Microsoft Teams, it doesn't connect to the correct microphone. So I apologize. Kelly Perales, co-director of the Midwest PBIS Network. We are a regional hub of the Center on PBIS, which is the federally funded technical assistance center out of the U.S. Department of Education. There are several regional hubs like ours, and the name is a bit of a misnomer because we have 8 states assigned to us. One of them is Arkansas, which clearly is not in the Midwest in geography, but nevertheless, that is the way that we situate. And we're happy to be here with all of you today. Some of you we've met with before and have worked with, and some of you we're going to be meeting for the first time. And it's great to see that so many of you were able to join today. We do have some slides that we're going to share just to kind of set the stage and help everyone think about potential opportunities for doing the work moving forward. And then we hope to have some time to have some open discussion and come up with some concrete action items in terms of next steps. So let's see, I think I should be able to share my PowerPoint here. Are you seeing my screen now?
Not yet. Do I need to do something on this end so that you
can
share?
Hold on, I think I got it.
Okay.
How about now?
Yes.
All right, awesome. So a little bit of, as I mentioned, our overall goals for this hour that we have together. At the risk of telling some of you things you already know, I want to describe a little bit of certainly my understanding and Katie's understanding of the history and some of the current efforts happening in the state of Kentucky, a little bit about why we've invited all of you here today together with Christina and Debbie and other folks who are part of the school climate transformation grant efforts through KDE. Then we're going to define a little bit about our vision to support capacity building across the co-ops. And our hope is that we can leave today with a shared vision for the direction of an aligned social emotional behavior support structure in Kentucky, so that we can provide you with technical assistance to build capacity across your state. I do want to just say that we want to honor and respect contextual differences. You know, that's true for all of your co-ops because you live in different regions of Kentucky, and it's true across the country. And so we're going to do our best to say what any acronyms stand for, but we recognize that language that we use might be different from what you use. And my example of late is the difference between pop and soda. If you live in Michigan, where I'm from, you refer to a Coke or a Pepsi or whatever as a pop. And I live in South Central Pennsylvania, where it's referred to as soda. We're talking about the same type of beverage, but it goes by different names. And that's true in our work as well. We also want to invite you to interrupt us at any time if you want clarification or want to actually correct us on anything we share that is actually not accurate in terms of reflecting the history and current state of this work in Kentucky or your area. Also, feel free to ask us questions. It seems to be more helpful to just jump in with those rather than waiting for a natural pause or opportunity. You should also know that sometimes your questions are not going to be easily answered. This work, as you all know, is muddy. It's not super clear or linear, or answers are rarely just yes or no. And so we might need to ask a few clarifying questions before providing an answer. And we're always learning too. We've learned from a lot of the great work that has happened in your schools and districts, and that's true in other projects that we've been a part of as well. And so if you hear a message today that seems different from something you've heard in the past, it could be that we've changed our message based on our own learning, not only from those doing the work in the field, but also from the research that we've been a part of. I want to just say that, again, depending on where you situate, we know that from the state and then down to the co-ops, there is a history of supports around positive behavior intervention and supports, multi-tiered systems of supports, the interconnected systems framework. We sometimes use these words interchangeably, but that's been true both via regular education funding streams as well as special education. There is a history of the Department of Education in Kentucky funding efforts around PBIS, and you all have had the benefit of some federal grants, both through the U.S. Department of Education, like the School Climate Transformation Grant right now, as well as through SAMHSA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Service Administration, and that is Project Aware, which you've now had 2 rounds of that funding. And I know that there are other grants as well, like SPDIG and some others that have supported some of this work over time. And Katie and I, over the years, maybe myself a little bit longer than her, and we don't need to get into, dates or ages or things like that. We have worked with some of your co-ops to support your efforts with your districts and schools in, again, PBIS, MTSS, ISF. I want to give some credit to Catherine Tillett and a few others. These slides that I'm going to show you next actually come from some that we put together as one of our presentations for the 2020 PBIS National Leadership Forum. You all were highlighted as an exemplar at the state and district level of implementing an aligned and integrated system, so interconnected systems framework in some of your districts. And kind of prioritizing the work at the state level as well. And so this just gives you a visual representation of some of those pieces that I was just talking about. And again, some of you in this meeting today know much more about the details of this than even I do around your work and your efforts, not only in the grants, but also in the state leadership teams and ISF subcommittee and things like that. And so big picture here is I hope you take away from today that one of the goals is that we continue to find opportunities to braid and blend the work so we can help you efficiently and effectively support your districts and schools in order to improve outcomes for students and families. And so that's that piece around opportunities for alignment and integration. And just a few points for some of you who might be newer to this work. There are efforts happening in several districts, either because of the district's connection to one of the grants. So for example, currently in Project Aware, there are 3 districts, Warren County, Henderson County, Bullitt County, who are all part of those grant efforts. You can see here some districts who are part of the first round of Aware. And then through our center, we have what we're calling a model demonstration project. And there are a couple of districts who have been participating in those efforts as well. And so the state leadership team over the years, using what was the PBIS implementation blueprint self-assessment, we now have a newer tool called the State System Fidelity Inventory. If you're familiar with the tiered fidelity inventory that schools use, that's the state and also regional or co-op level instrument that is helping you to develop an action plan to move towards that idea of essentially building a 10-year strategic plan for implementation and sustainability of these efforts. And so, over the last few years, the state has been working on identifying those priorities and supporting both the executive function and implementation functions of this work. We situate the work in PBIS because there are over 20 years of research and evidence to demonstrate that it is an evidence-based multi-tiered system of support with improved outcomes for students and teachers, including things like reductions in discipline and suspension and increases in teacher retention and things like that. So I'm not going to read all of this to you. And if you're interested, you can actually go back and watch the recording of this presentation from our forum, which was a year ago in October. So here's that graphic of the implementation blueprint. And what we want you all to think about, especially those who are working in the co-ops, is that this logic of a leadership team, so whether you're at the state level or the co-op level, attending to the executive functions, which are up here at the top in the blue boxes, as well as the implementation functions of the work. And in general, we encourage the use of demonstrations. So you might pick 1 or 2 districts, and within those districts, a couple of schools to get started with the work, test some things out, learn some lessons, and iterate from there. Just yesterday, I actually had the pleasure of joining the Behavior Consultants Task Force group. I don't think I said that name exactly correctly, but they were talking about how, this work is hard and it's a process, and we're talking about human service, and, never forget the fact that in the last 18 months, we've been in the middle of a global pandemic, so it's even more challenging. And we have to help folks see the way to problem solve and work through some of the challenges and barriers because it can become frustrating. And so that logic of the implementation is true across what we call the cascade of implementation. So here we are, Katie and I, as part of the technical assistance for PBIS and ISF. And right now we're working with the state team, and they have a plan for implementation. We have also done some work, as I mentioned, and are currently in some of your co-ops around capacity building for you to support districts and schools in this work. We want to make enhanced connections from the state to the co-ops. And then in your co-ops, you want to be supporting district teams to be able to support their schools. And so the big idea here is we want to work with all of you so that this cascade becomes a little bit more linear, so to speak, than the state offering training and technical assistance to schools, as well as the co-ops, as well as some other groups. And sometimes that can end up being confusing to schools because they're not sure who to turn to. And right now, with the added funding and the luxury of being able to hire through regular ed these CRISA coordinators, what we want to help you avoid is that PBIS might be supported from, one department or person who's a behavior consultant, and now CRISA coordinators under a different funding stream or department, and there's confusion for schools. Instead, we want to help you all build your capacity as a team and a cohesive unit, and be able to be clear about how you're going to build capacity to support, tier 1, what you do for all the way up to intensive individualized interventions. So I'm just going to pause. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen in hopes that I can see some of you. But I'd like to hear from the group about what I described. What did I get right? What did I get wrong? What do you perceive as the current status? And what's your desired future when you think about how to best support the social, emotional, behavioral health and wellness of staff and students in your schools? Okay. I was just checking the chat. I'm glad to see there was some conversation about pop and soda. And I've heard this too, the piece about saying it's a Coke, even if it's a Dr. Pepper, right? Or a Sprite or whatever. Yeah. Christina, thanks for adding that piece about SEL. And again, I think that's a great example of, there are these related initiatives, and sometimes people think we need a new team or a new curriculum or a new plan or a new something to address trauma-informed care, social emotional learning, et cetera, et cetera. And we've got to really focus on our framework and the way in which to go about some of that work. How about others? Thoughts, comments, questions?
I would just like to say, this is Tammy Williams from WKEC. First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming to the table together today. This is a conversation that I think has been needed for a while. And I appreciate you bringing clarity to the alignment and the communication that is required from all of the different agencies that are providing services. We've been working with Katie for a little over a year, and that has been a concern of ours all along, that there's enough work out there. We have enough districts that need this support. There's enough work for all of us, but we must align and define what our roles are to prevent that confusion that you mentioned within our districts, because we've already seen that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And we want, I personally, as the regional director of WKEC for the special ed department, that is something I want to avoid at all costs. I want them to know that we are all in this together. Our goals are the same, supporting our students with the and our teachers in this difficult time for their social emotional status. So I appreciate this opportunity. I'm working with our CRISA team right now. Our CRISA lead is on this call at the moment, and we are constantly having communication about this so that we do align our work and not cross over and step on toes. We need to send a message to our districts that we are a stronger entity together, but we've got to send a clear message to those districts about, what our roles are to support them.
Thanks, Tammy.
If I could, I'd also just like to chime in that we understand that the dynamics in your regions and in your co-ops, the resources that are available, where you are with implementation support for PBIS and ISF may vary across the state. And so we want to be responsive to that and not have sort of a one size fits all approach with working with the co-ops, and really try to, engage you where it makes sense, but, kind of let you do your own thing where, it also makes sense. And also just recognize that for the folks that are receiving that information, they don't need, it doesn't really matter who's funding what. We just really want to be here to help you all and help build the capacity, and we want to take cues from you all about what would be helpful, also being mindful of the fact that the CRISA teams are pretty new, and we don't want to overwhelm them with too much at the beginning, but we're just, we'll be kind of trying to feel our way through this to find the right fit for, the support and alignment as we go. So having those lines of communication open, I think, are going to be super important for that.
Thanks, Christina. Great point. All right, for the sake of time, I'm going to move us along to the next section here. Do you see the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so the School Climate Transformation Grant, it's a 5-year funding cycle. We're actually coming up to the end of year 3, so 2 years left. I think I got that math right. And when it was written, you can see here the 3 primary objectives of the grant. Again, our center are tapped by the federal department to provide technical assistance. And so we've been meeting with Christina and Debbie and the school climate coordinators over the course of these last few years. And they have decided to use some of their funding to support this capacity building plan. And so the big idea is that when it's all said and done and the grant funding ends, that there would be a plan in place, just like that cascade visual, so that the efforts of multi-tiered behavior frameworks, PBIS, ISF, whichever words you would choose to use, can sustain, and you all can keep the work going. And so, again, we don't need to go into the details here, but there is an action plan that the team has put together, and we've been iterating it over time. So here you can see this is an update from January of this year. And by the way, a big celebration in my mind is that the work has been able to continue in spite of everything that's been happening in the last 18 months. And so that's definitely something that you all should feel very proud about. And so I want to turn now and help you think about, what's in it for me? There's a lot going on. We know that, certainly there are still issues and concerns around COVID-19. And that has led to other issues this school year around shortages of teachers, substitutes, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, you name it. And so we certainly want to honor that you have many competing priorities for your time. And we want to help you think about the value added in prioritizing this work and joining along for this opportunity to create a plan that's going to help you all in an efficient and effective way. And so we certainly have come to the conclusion that, although many of us in this work have been talking about the need to prioritize social emotional wellness and mental health, it has certainly never been more clear. And we need to find ways to systematically manage anxiety, depression, and the impact of trauma. This includes not only for students and their families in connection to that, but also for staff within schools. People are stressed and stretched, and this year feels more unpredictable than last year. And we know that people are kind of standing by to have to go virtual or hybrid, as well as respond to some of the challenges around mental health. I know that in talking with some of the school climate coordinators, just like in other places, you too have had to respond to suicides and other mental health crises. And so, this only reinforces the fact that not only do we have to have a plan to react and respond, but we also need to focus energy on prevention, early identification, and intervention. And we also need to pay attention to relationships, caring and connecting with one another to help support each other and move us along in these ever challenging times. The state of Washington put together this report to help us all think about what we know from prior major life events or disasters or catastrophes or, essentially big things that have happened that have led to increases in the need for addressing mental and behavioral health. And so although the timeline kind of shifts, and this is probably somewhat outdated now because January feels like years ago to me, we can predict that we are going to see, and I think we are now seeing with the start of this new school year, increases in concerns around exhaustion, burnout, trauma, and secondary trauma. And so we need to be thinking about how can we help and what can we do to support. And what we have learned in recent years from the literature is that if we use our multi-tiered system of support and the core features, no matter the practice or initiative, we're going to be able to have more accurate, durable, and scalable implementation. This service delivery model is grounded in the public health ideas of prevention and a continuum of evidence-based practices using local contextual data for decision-making. And it helps us more efficiently identify students who need additional support and get them connected to appropriate interventions. And so again, whether you're talking about addressing opioids or substance misuse, integrating a trauma-informed approach, or teaching social emotional competencies, or that idea of SEL, we have lots of resources and guidance around how to embed these ideas into your multi-tiered system of support. Again, so things don't become siloed, so you don't have multiple teams, committees, and work groups, and so that you can have one comprehensive single system of delivery. This slide here, the graphic comes from McIntosh and Goodman's book around aligning MTSS academics and behavior, so to speak. I think, those of you who've been around us in the last few years recognize that our messages in PBIS have evolved beyond simply talking about acting out problem behavior. We still need to do so, and we need to be paying better attention to those kids who are suffering in silence in our schools or have what we refer to as internalizing concerns. And the big idea here is these are the core features of a multi-tiered system of support. And so we want to work with you to help your districts and schools understand that and utilize the steps to begin not only to align and integrate, but also to have that comprehensive system rather than thinking or drifting into PBIS simply being about posters of expectations on the wall and some sort of acknowledgement system or token economy. Again, if you're interested in the literature around why we use the PBIS framework to situate these other related initiatives, it is because of the data and the evidence. And so here you can see some of those things I mentioned a few minutes ago. And again, feel free to explore the literature on our website as well. And when talking about an interconnected framework, that is the ways in which not only do you make more of a conscious effort of engaging and including families, but also your other community partners, whether that's through your RESAs or your mental health organizations or other child-serving formal systems like justice and child welfare. It's also who else in the community cares about this work, or where do kids and families spend their time outside of school? You know, do you have a community organization or Boys and Girls Club or YMCA or a faith-based organization that provides before and after school care or other types of supports to families? We're talking about that single system of delivery. And so part of the plan in working with your co-ops is to help you think about what are those natural partnerships and how can you leverage some of those efforts or learn from other districts who've already been doing some of this work. This is a busy slide, but it speaks to the teaming. Big idea here is no one person can do this alone. We need multidisciplinary teams of experts who have different perspectives and perceptions and areas of expertise to lend their input into shared decision-making around those implementation functions. And so this comes from a paper that my colleague Joni Splett and I led around considerations for teaming across that cascade of implementation. And before we continue, I'm going to just pause again here to see if comments or questions are coming up. All right. Christina, thanks for clearly articulating the acronym there. Not seeing any other questions. Does anyone have anything they'd like to comment about or ask about at this point? All right. So I see we have about 25 minutes left. Katie, do you want to go ahead into some of the ideas we have around potential next steps? And then again, if everyone could be thinking about, you know, your reaction or response to our proposed ideas, and then let's have some dialogue around some very concrete next steps and action items.
Sure thing. Let's see if I get, are you guys seeing this slide and not my presentation mode?
Katie, there's, when you get the window that pops up to say share, you have to click like literally on the picture of what, there you go. Now I see it.
Did it work? Okay. I think there might be a little bit of a delay. So
okay.
Got it now?
Yep.
Perfect. All right. As you can tell, Kelly and I are more used to Zoom. So thanks for your patience as we navigate with Teams. So yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit this morning about some of the conversations that we've been having with the school climate transformation consultants and their team on what might supports look like as we continue to support that building capacity within your state, and that if you recall that cascade that Kelly showed of state, regional, and district capacity. So just like we think about layering interventions for students, we are wanting to kind of put these supports out in that same layered approach for building your regional capacity. So the supports I'm going to describe are not all inclusive. There's probably other options, and that's why one of the reasons that you're here today, to just get us thinking about what else do you need specifically in your region, and how might these supports meet that, and what else might you be needing. Also think about where you saw Midwest PBIS kind of situated in that cascade that Kelly showed. We were off to the side, and there were arrows there to say, sometimes our support might be at the state level, sometimes at the regional, sometimes at the district. But our main goal is to build the state capacity, so build the capacity of the school climate team to support regions and districts. Therefore, as I talk about some of these supports and that we're going to describe, sometimes those supports might be directly delivered by the school climate consultants, with them continuing to work with Midwest on that, a consultation level of developing what those supports might look like. Other supports might be Midwest is going to deliver those supports with the school climate team. And then sometimes there are few supports might be directly facilitated by Midwest, but always with the notion that we want to build the capacity for the school climate consultants to continue to support this work as we build that capacity, so that it's sustainable over time, even after the school climate grant is gone. So as we're thinking about these supports, we've layered them, just like we think about layered supports for students. So some universal strategies that might be supports for all regions, some more targeted strategies that might be for systems or regions that maybe you're looking to kind of boost up your implementation, or you're at an innovation stage. And some targeted supports that might be, we're really in initial implementation stages with installing our systems, or we're needing to really reboot. We have a lot of new staff or new roles within our support. So if we think first about those universal prevention level strategies, we're really thinking these are regions that you really have established infrastructures of support, but you would like to really just continue your efforts. Christina really talked about how there's different levels of where you're at and across the state in your implementation. But our main goal here is to continue to develop sustainable and scalable systems. So what we think that those supports might look like, we know that the statewide team is already offering coaches network supports and maybe continuing to join some of those coaching supports and training. What we also have heard as we have conversations, and the state team is having conversations, is that there's some talk and some need for regional coaching support, so that we can share and learn from one another and make sure there's consistency in our messages and how we're supporting districts. So that might be kind of a newer level of support of a statewide regional coaching or PBIS facilitator type of network that might meet on a regular basis. We've also heard this need for a train the trainer, or a building the capacity, and I think specifically for some of those new roles with the Carissa team members. So, how might we go about doing that so that we really offer some level of support to build some training capacity within the regions. If we were going to layer some supports into some targeted supports, then that might look like those regions wanting to really kind of boost their implementation. And so what that might look like as we layer supports might look like, maybe some training and technical assistance to go beyond tier 1. Maybe you're looking to install some advanced tiers, and we have heard that, but we know that's not necessarily where all regions are, but we know there's some. We know there's also some need, maybe it's more specific training and technical assistance, and you have districts that are implementing tier 1 maybe with Fidelity, but they're really looking to come back and think about ensuring that they're implementing with a equitable lens, and that they're integrating trauma and their mental health supports within one single system of delivery. So maybe there's some more specific topic areas of support that might be supported. We also, you heard Kelly talk about the state systems fidelity inventory, which is a really designed for the state level, but also supporting regions. And we've had at least one region complete that SSFI in Kentucky, I think a couple actually, and use that to help them action plan for developing out those infrastructures. So we know that some of you that have lots happening in your regions and in your co-ops might benefit, or say, that would help us in defining some next steps to ensure we have the infrastructure to support sustainable implementation. And finally, if we want to think about how we would layer up into those intensive supports, we know that there are regions that are really in initial stages, or we just have enough new staff or new shifts in how our organization is organized and made up, that maybe we need to come back to really going back to developing our infrastructures to support, or kind of rebooting our systems. And so what intensive supports might look like is, as Kelly mentioned, really working with those local demonstration sites, so that we have a stages of implementation, and we really work from a regional level of where are we at, and do we have a regional leadership team? Do we have one unified vision at a regional level? Have we assessed our current status? And then how do we select some districts and help them to develop that same piece, that a district leadership team, a unified vision at a district level, assessing their capacity to support sustainable implementation over time before we go into district and school level implementation. So really this cascade of implementation from region and developing out the supports at a regional level to ensure that those pieces are there before we start engaging directly with districts and identifying those districts. So what that might really look like is some technical assistance at a regional team level, maybe using that SSFI to help direct action planning, some monthly support to a PBIS facilitator to help with coordinating and next steps. So for supporting that implementation, but really selecting some demo districts to work with to really walk through and develop all of our infrastructure pieces, as Kelly mentioned, that we use those demo sites to learn and have and put our infrastructures in place so we can then bring on additional districts into that support. And again, this might be a level where you already have districts that are implementing, and we still can offer them some additional support. And what that training then might look like, but really starting at a district level to support going down to school level implementation with tier 1. So really coming back to that layered approach and where are your needs, as Christina mentioned, that we know that it's not a one size fits all on where all of your co-ops are in need of support. So I'm going to try to figure out how to stop sharing my screen. Did I do it? So you guys can kind of reflect on how might those supports be sitting when you heard those described, what might be supports that your co-op is needing, and what might not you have heard, or what questions might you have about what those might look like? And I think Christina, Deborah, anything else that you guys would add to help with clarifying based on your end?
Okay, I know that a lot of times when we're in these virtual meetings, there's a little bit of a delay for people to speak, because you don't want to talk all over somebody and then it's like 3 people decide it's safe and go ahead and talk at the same time. So I'm just going to give you just a few minutes so that you can kind of just let everything that they've said sink in. And I do know that some of you, the 2 big questions that you had from me when we met last week was, what's this going to cost you all, and what are the timelines for moving this project forward? So if those are still some of your questions, then this is the time to discuss it. But if you have other questions other than that too, then please jump in. All right.
Would it be helpful to maybe go co-op by co-op to see, kind of like what are the pieces that stood out as something that might be of interest, and at least initially, and then maybe we can have deeper conversations later to kind of probe what the needs are for the different co-ops. So like maybe there's 3 co-ops that are looking for more support around tier 2 interventions, and then there's all the co-ops are really looking at those universal supports or something along those lines. I think that might help.
Sounds good. Who would like to start us off? Okay. Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but Megan and I have talked a few times about what she would like to see with Chris of Folks. So if she wants to comment on that, that would be great. If not, don't feel like you have to. And then I can't think. Jerry and I had talked a few times.
Debbie, this is Sarah Evans from the SCSC. I don't know if you can hear me. I have a very bad connection. And I think Renee, I can't get Joe to open up. So I think Renee and Brandy are also on from the co-op. And so Brandy and Renee, you can jump in if you want as well.
I was the guy that I loved that would kill somebody who needed to be killed.
Sorry.
Okay, kind of like that.
Anyway, the 3 of us might need to get together, and then of course we have a new executive director coming on Friday to look co-op wide across to see what we need. So I'm not sure if we can actually answer your question at the moment, unless Brandy and Renee can jump on and help me here a little bit.
We can always circle back with you later. So thank you for sharing that. I know, especially since you're kind of in transition with some things, but you've also been doing some work with Midwest and around PBIS for a long time. So
yeah, we're very excited. We haven't had as a team, we haven't had a chance to sit down and discuss it.
I wonder if Katie and I were kind of talking about this in preparation for today. Certainly, as you said, maybe you all need to kind of huddle back in your co-ops and talk through it a little bit. If there wouldn't be value in a next step being some sort of, quick little Google survey or something like that, or probably in Microsoft Teams, you have something like that as well. Debbie or Christina, that you all could send out to sort of poll the group and find out, again, kind of further assessing that, what's the current status, or what do you think you'd like to see happen next? as something to consider.
Kelly, can I share a little bit?
Yes, thanks, Megan.
So one of the things that we have been working on as CRISA directors and all the co-ops across the state is that we would like to build capacity with our SEL and school mental health specialists. A lot of them do not have a background in PBIS. And so that was one of the things that Deb and Christina, I've talked to both of them about, is scheduling a train the trainer for our individual SEL specialist group was one of the things that we thought would be a good starting place for capacity building. But then I know that several other co-ops already have a plan in place as to how they're going to continue with that capacity building and sustainability. So I think that it's almost like a two-sided coin. Is we need to build capacity with the CRISA teams, but then I also think that each co-op is going to have a different pathway and how they build capacity within their individual region. So that's kind of some of the conversation that we have had with the CRISA teams. And I noticed that there were a couple other, Christy Phelps was on as well. I know we've talked about that. And I see that Jerry and Brana are on. So if anybody else wants to jump in on that CRISA discussion, please do. But that's kind of one of the things that we have focused on in our conversations.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Megan. And I think that is a really great idea. Is, to me, that's let's get on the same page with what it is we're even talking about and how you would go about getting started with supporting this work or being a trainer or technical assistance provider. So that certainly might be a really great first step. And I know that there's been a little bit of maybe not a little bit, but a sense of urgency around getting that started. So I think we're ready to figure out, when and where and how. Is it, do we bring people together? Is it something virtual? How do we go about getting some things on the calendar, especially, because people are busy? So I think that would be a concrete item for sure.
And I will also add, Kelly, that when we did the survey with the CRISA teams, I believe that the total number that would like to start there was 17. That was kind of a participant number. I know that'll help when we start talking about scheduling and location. So.
Oh, this is Brona Francis from Quebec. Hi, everyone. Jerry, our director, we had talked in our meeting with the CRISA team that we want to meet with each of our districts. That's our purpose in finding out their needs, where they need to start. Do they have a PBIS in place? Do they have the multi-tiered system? Do they have a plan for that? Do they have enough evidence-based practices or that they use, and kind of see which districts are kind of in the same spot, which ones have already started or are well in the SEL, bringing that into their multi-tiered system and the behavior too. So that's kind of where we're at, and we have all kinds of resources that they can get on there to use. But Renee talked yesterday about having a plan that we can all, and I thought it was a good idea, so we can all kind of see, okay, do we start with tier 1? Okay, let's start with tier 1 and see where everyone is there. Okay, and then train on that and go from there. We have a lot of, and I'm just saying this from past experience, a lot of spotty plans. I don't want to say, you know what I'm saying? Like, yes, one school may do this, and they may not do it consistently, and they might not know how important it is to do it consistently, and have different strategies, not just the same strategy or the same screener for every school, every kid, every class. So there's a lot to think about when you're looking at different districts and different schools in all those districts, and you have a different plan with each school or each district. Because I know when I was special ed director, we had an RTI plan, which is kind of the same thing as multi-tier, but we had behavior in ours. But now it's really, it's the pyramid. It's not just the pyramid. It's you know, it's the the all sides. You know, you've got your academic on this side, and you've got your behavior on this side, and so we just have to talk to our districts and see who is actually merging their academics with their behaviors, because we know behavior affects academics and vice versa. You know, so. That's kind of where we are. I mean, we have all kinds of things to offer them, but one of the big things that we want to know is exactly what do they need and where are they, you know, so.
Yep. Great point. Thank you for sharing.
Okay.
And I think that idea that you're describing, and these are going to be my words, is, you know, sort of that needs assessment of the districts and schools, and then collectively, you know, the needs assessment of the various co-ops to help inform, as Katie was describing, who among you wants to shoulder partner and walk through the step-by-step process of, you know, providing training and technical assistance together, and who is a little bit farther along and only wants a tiny bit of support with one thing, maybe, right? Like it's that cascade again of the support that we want to help, you know, build up all along the way.
And Brenna, what I might add to, like, just to kind of help give a little more concreteness to some of those described supports that are hard whenever we don't have the specific examples. But I think what I heard you describing might also be, like, how could like learning from Southeast South Central or West Kentucky or GREC or lots of other co-ops around the state, how are they approaching that needs assessment conversation? What kinds of, you know, how do they have that conversation? What are the tools they have set up? Like, so there is maybe some consistency. And so to me, that's that universal support of a, like, kind of a regional coaching network of bringing those facilitators together and having that conversation. And so I wonder if, you know, another kind of quicker next step might be, how might we get that started? And maybe the first conversation is around needs assessment and kind of readiness and assessing that part, and having you guys all share, how do you do that? And what's that really look like?
This is Amy from Northern Kentucky, and I'm just going to add a few things that I think have already been said, but just to, I'll say verify what I think I know. But I think, I don't know who said it before, maybe Tammy, about just aligning the thinking with the PBIS and the IDA world, because I know that was a large conversation here already. And so just making sure that we honor that, and I don't even truly know what I mean by that, just to be real transparent, but I know that it's been a large conversation. And so I want to make sure we handle that the right way and very transparently, because we know this work's important. And then the other piece is we work through, you know, just, we know that this is important, but we also think all of us are very aware of how bombarded the schools are right now with one more thing. And so while we know surveys are important and getting feedback and giving them the right thing, just trying to figure out what data we might already have that we could use. And, you know, I think most co-ops have already went through, and I know this isn't exactly what we're talking about, but we did the Lieutenant Governor's mental health you know, piece with students, and that is a piece of data that I think would be valuable in this. I sat through the whole process and thought it was really an incredible way. You know, we as adults, like, keep talking about what kids need, and to hear them speak was very powerful. I echoed several times that day. And so, you know, as we're looking at supports, listening to them and what they had to say, like, I don't want to be passed around from adult to adult. When I go to an adult and I ask for help, I want it from that adult. It took me a lot to ask for help, and I don't want to be taken from this adult and then passed to this adult. It's uncomfortable when I feel like an adult's going through a protocol just to help me. I want it to be authentic and sincere, and I know the difference. And I mean, I think we all know that, and that's not like shocking, but to hear them say it was still very eye-opening. It makes that a lot more. And so, you know, they're putting all that information together and giving that to us with statewide finds and AHAs and then regional AHAs. So I just think that's an example of information that could be really valuable to us as we, I think, put this work together.
Thank you, Amy.
Just a little 2 cents. It may help, it may not, but.
For sure. So I'm looking at the clock, and I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I know this was scheduled for 1 hour, and thank you all so much for your active participation. I think it's really helpful to hear everyone's thoughts and ideas. And so, Debbie and Christina, I want to turn to you because, again, I want Katie and I to be able to be responsive with you, and if nothing else, maybe say when could a few folks reconnect and identify, dates and times, especially for what Megan was speaking to around providing some initial training for people who might be new to PBIS or this work. And Katie, are you okay to maybe help navigate some of those next steps? I'm actually going to have to, I apologize, get to my next meeting here as well.
And can I just add one more thing? What
of course.
We're talking about next steps? Yeah. I think, and my colleagues, if they could join me and say I'm way off base or not, but I think we're all super grateful for all of these projects, but we've had like 6 or 7 come at us in the last couple months that we're helping bridge right with the districts. And I know we've all talked, we're super excited about them, and that's not even the right way to say it, but like we're grateful. It's really the first time this has happened in a way that's really, I think, impacting the work that we do and connecting that to the work with the districts. But I think for me, some of the blank stares you're getting isn't that I'm not interested, it's just really trying to process.
Sure.
Okay, this project's different than the project for Jim, that's different from the project that's for Damien, that's different from the project. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's a lot of SEL work going on. And so I think when we're talking forward steps, the sooner I can get someone in my organization that's championing this work, the better. I want to be involved, but somebody who can really say, no, Amy, that's this and not that will help. Because it's all starting to cross over for me. I'm involved. Telling you that. I don't know. My colleagues might be swifter than me, but I'm struggling a little bit trying to keep it all straight. And so it's not that, I think that might be some of the.
I know we're close on time, but Amy, you are expressing exactly what we get when we sit down with the districts. And so I'm very confident that Katie and Kelly will be able to capture that in a way that it's not a separate project. That's the message we send to the districts. We've got to do that systems alignment. And when we approach a district and explain that to them, that this isn't another thing on their plate, but this all aligns. And once they can see that picture and you're able to see that picture, it makes so much more sense. And it gives you a little more, or lessens your anxiety.
Exactly. That's perfect.
So I know Kelly has to run, but I did want to just speak to that real quick because we've been having the same conversations at the state level, and that's actually something that Damien and Jan Sellers and a few other folks and I have been working on with the Center for Improving Social Emotional Learning and School Safety over the past year. Is just trying to kind of look at all of that different SEL and MTSS related activities and think about how they align so that we're all working smarter and not harder, and that everyone kind of is able to kind of wrap their arms around the big picture. And so there isn't some of that confusion with, okay, well, this is Damien's work, or this is, you know, the work of the Carissa teams, or this is the other piece. And just for Katie's benefit, I assume that Amy was kind of referencing maybe some of the work around the SEL framework that's being developed, and maybe some other stuff happening with the Carissa teams. But we definitely want to be able to connect all those dots for people. And I think that's where Midwest PBIS will also be able to help us with that. And so with us as a collective group, but also you all as with the co-ops and your districts. So that's an excellent point, Amy, and I appreciate you bringing that up. And we want to be respectful of the fact that there's a lot of new stuff happening right now. We're of course eager to hit the ground running, but we know that that's not going to work if you all are not in that same space, because you're trying to get all of your, you know, pieces aligned. So we just want to be responsive to that and not try to push you into something that you're not quite ready for in terms of this work.
And Christina, thank you. That is helpful. I wonder, like, it sounds like a couple of like the more, like especially one of the immediate things was kind of getting a little bit more defined on what we termed as a train the trainer for the Carissa support specialists, which I think are the SEL and mental health specialists. But I wonder if one of the next steps might be taking a few key stakeholders, so some of the school climate team and some of maybe Megan and you know, another person or two from kind of the Carissa side, and identifying what might that look like, because we're terming it train the trainer, but I think I'm also hearing, how do we help with, how does SEL and mental health fit within a framework, and like, so, you know, not necessarily always just a trainer of what is tier 1, but more of, so I wonder if one of the next steps is kind of getting a few of those key stakeholders together to maybe define out what it would be some of the objectives of that, what we're terming train the trainer, and then how do we accomplish that? Is that going to be in person? Is that virtual? Is that kind of, you know, so that then that could be put out for Carissa, for all of you to say, yes, that works. That's how we're going to go about doing this work. Does that sound like a concrete next step to kind of get that ball rolling?
Yes. Is there a part, and maybe this is too soon, but for the train the trainer, because usually we send the people who are like, you know, super passionate and involved. As part of that, could they brainstorm possible connections so that, like, I would love to have some examples. And that's usually what we do a lot through text, and that, like, how are you using this? What are you going to do? Like when we got the money for the DEI positions, right? That's incredible. But again, how do we make that usable in the right way for our districts? So, you know, talking through that and saying, here's how that's not one more thing. Here's how that's not going to add more work, but be valuable. And presenting that in a practical way was really helpful. So I don't know. I mean, I know the train the trainer is probably a scripted, but like just having some brain trust that could say, here's some like Kentucky language of, like you said, Christina, purposeful ways that it will already connect with what you need to get done to help kids.
And
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and that's a conversation that some of us in leadership actually just had the other day. You know, with my office, and Damien's in a different office, but we collaborate very closely. And so we were just talking about how there might be a need for some of these DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion specialists to maybe be included on some of the PBIS training and some of these other SEL related trainings, and that there is a real perhaps, you know, eagerness for some of that content. So we can all, you know, we'll leave it up to you all to say, like, who needs to be part of each piece of the process that we're doing. But, you know, we would welcome all of that.
Christina and Debbie, does that feel like the next step of kind of pulling that piece together, or is there a different way to do that?
Let me throw this out there. I'm wondering if maybe if we put out something to the folks that are here, and you can share it with anybody else in your co-ops that should be included. But if we put out almost like a menu of options and see who's ready for what right now, and give you an opportunity to list, like who should be included in that offering. So like if we say, it's just, an overview of the PBIS framework as a whole, kind of like PBIS 101, or if it's looking at more in depth at those tier 1 interventions, and you just kind of go through, like either through a survey or something, and kind of indicate what it is that you think your folks at your co-op would be ready for as your first next step, and then give us a sense of who the individuals or the roles are within your co-op that should be included in that. I know I also heard some folks say that they need to go back to their districts and get a better sense of that from them. So maybe we could also include in that, like, do you need some resources or tools to make that conversation a little bit easier with your districts? Does that seem like that might make sense for folks, or does that make sense for you, Katie? Can you hear me?
Yeah, we heard you.
Okay.
I was waiting to see if that made sense to the co-ops, but I think Christina, that is, one way I think we could think about kind of a needs assessment. It could be a reach out that way, or is it a reach out of a conversation, a follow-up conversation from the school climate team with you to kind of talk through what that looks like. I don't know what is more efficient for us when you have lots of things coming at you.
So is the goal to, like, I'll go back to the funding. Is the 18,000 to follow up after we get people trained, or is that to just what I'm thinking about who I'll train, or do you see what I'm saying?
I'm not sure what you're referring to in terms of 18,000.
I thought I heard that at some point.
If you did, it wasn't part of this. We basically have, we don't have any money to give you all. What we do have is the opportunity. We have a contract that we have with Midwest PBIS that is very flexible to pay for any supports that they are able to give to you. So there, you could easily be getting $18,000 from another funding source that might align with this, but that's not something that I'm aware of. And so what we're basically offering is training, technical assistance, and support through Midwest PBIS, and that's not something that you all would need to pay for. Does that help clarify?
We're going to, that's perfect. That's great. So I'm glad I asked. So we're going to, because I kept thinking, so then what are we doing with that? So we're going to build the human capacity of staff so that they can sustain, build, and the examples that were given before were just ways. I got it. Okay. That's helpful. That's the piece that I kept missing. I kept thinking, and then what are we doing with that? Okay. Perfect.
I know you all are probably getting lots of money thrown at you from different sources for different purposes, and I don't even know what it all is. So I'm happy to clarify what I do know about.
Yeah. And will these trainings be virtual? Is that what we're thinking? Katie?
I think it could be either. And I will say, you know, I think especially with that Carissa's support team, and again, this is where I think I need to hear a little bit more from. It could be all Carissa special, those 17, but I think it could be a few that are leaders in that to help define that a little bit more. But I think and maybe the school climate team has a better understanding, but I think we need to understand a little bit more of what is it, and then that will help define what that training could look like. I would see it as kind of ongoing, and not just a 2-day train the trainer, but more of a let's do some training for understanding, and then maybe joining back to practice those messages. And so I think it could maybe even be a mix of some in-person and some virtual in that way. But I think capacity building really is more about ongoing support than just one time. So
I would like to
not a yes or no.
Yeah, I'd like to echo what Katie just said. You know, we're already in the process, and I know that sets us unique, us and a couple other, 1 or 2 other co-ops, but we have been concerned on how to onboard our CRISA team and to partner with them, because we urgently want to do that. But I think we need to be cautious of that mindset and using that terminology just yet. I think it's a little premature to be talking train the trainer when many of ours don't have a good background about what PBIS is to begin with. And so we've got to move through that, I believe, before we get to that point. So my vision is that the earliest thing, once we get them knowledgeable, is again fitting their objectives into the tiers, and then coordinating with existing structures in my co-op, for example, of we'll begin with technical assistance. I feel like that will be, and then later down the road, possibly partnering on training. I don't want us to be fragmented. I want us to be a cohesive group, even though we are funded differently. But, it hasn't been that long since I left a school district. And, I've been preaching all along. We ask districts to collaborate on all levels, Title I, special ed, general ed, and not to keep yourself in silos. And we've got to do the same thing as co-ops to be able to sufficiently support our districts.
I agree completely, Tammy. And we're at Southeast South Central. We're one of the co-ops where we are involved in that work, and we're blessed because our 2 of our CRISA team members were trainers with our PBIS work in our districts previously. So for us, it's going to be, kind of defining who does what, and we keep that cohesiveness as Tammy was speaking to.
So it does sound like maybe the next move might be to have, either small groups of co-ops or just individual conversations with co-ops to figure out those needs and next steps, because it does sound like every co-op that has shared at least is kind of has some unique circumstances that might be better explored through a conversation rather than just kind of a quick email survey or something like that. But we certainly want to be mindful of the fact that people tend to get meetinged to death lately, and just as Katie mentioned, I think we want to do what's going to be most efficient for you all, but that might be the way to do it, is just so we can explore those nuances for every co-op.
And I think that might allow you guys some time to have those conversations where you need to go back and talk with others, and then maybe saying, oh, but I need to bring this person to that follow-up conversation. So I think that kind of allows that flexibility to kind of do what you're doing with your districts, right? Then how are you reaching out and assessing their current status and what their needs are in that individual way? just to be clear, it does also sound like though there is a kind of a universal need on the Carissa support. So I don't know, Christina, in conjunction with kind of reaching out for those individual follow-up conversations with each co-op on what does each co-op need. Is there still a and how could we start brainstorming or defining a bit more about what the supports for maybe those Carissa teams could look like? Or do you feel like those co-op conversations need to happen before that happens? So I know that there's I hear the urgency for that.
I could be wrong, but I even kind of got the impression from what was shared that maybe even the Carissa teams and what they need is different in each co-op. It sounds like there are some that don't have much of a grounding in PBIS and others that might be pretty well grounded in it. So did I hear that correctly? Okay.
I'm good with
go ahead.
I'm good with a general call, but I mean, I think what I was hearing though, no matter like I see Jerry on my screen. So if Jerry has people, whether they're in IDA or Carissa, right, that are at need 101 or advanced, if we're going to offer these pieces, right, like at different levels, or Katie's going to say, here's 101 or here's, whatever we're going to offer, then we could decide who we put in that, right? So whether it's Carissa or, hey, I have a new IDA team member that might need it, but my other three are advanced, or one co-op says we're not doing any IDA. I mean, I think that's the trainings could be the trainings, but then we can decide, we could tailor it to who we put in there based on our needs. Is that where that comes in?
Yes.
So back to what Katie's saying, like if we move forward with the Carissa team and somebody doesn't, or the trainings, then you can put in them because they're small. Like I don't think you want to do, I don't think we were just going to, maybe you are, but I would think that the training 101 would be open to anybody in the co-op who need it 101, to all co-ops. I mean, if it got full, then we could do 2 sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Unless you were just on Carissa team 101, but that seems like that would be narrow.
No, I think that, I mean, you say more, Katie, but I think that in order to avoid that feeling of being siloed, we probably want, a mix of Carissa teams or IDA folks or whoever it is in your co-op that's going to be working to support this. If they all have the same need, they should all be in the room together to get that same content, because I think that will help create that unity and that it break down those silos a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So I'm very, very happy to do a one-on-one as a follow-up, but I think for me, a general survey would be nice, maybe to see how many of us need 101, and first, what are the trainings that, I know we could help with that too, but if you say in general 101 and this, here are the 4 basic trainings we could do at different tiers, and then I could kind of talk amongst my co-op and say, here's what I think we would need. I have 4 that need this, 6 that need that. That would at least give me something to go on, and then you could see how many of us need 101 versus how many of us need advanced. Does that make sense? No. Again, I don't even know. I could be way off, and you all can just say be quiet, and I'm fine with that. But for me, just to start talking, one, I don't know. I need something to talk to my staff with. I can talk in general with them, what do you need? What have you had? Some of them I know pretty well what they need, but others, here are the levels of training that we could be looking at. Does that make sense? No.
It does.
Come on, Jerry, hop in there.
I just try to keep my mouth shut most of the time on these things, but maybe it's too simple, but what we're trying to do is meet with each individual district with the Carissa team, also with having special ed folks in there. We're the last thing that our superintendents want is for themselves or for their staff to have to complete another needs assessment or survey. So we're meeting with their administrative teams to listen to them. So we're taking the needs assessment or survey from them without them having to complete or do anything, because they've had it up to their eyeballs with needs assessments and surveys. So we try to make this tailor-made specifically for them. If what PBS offers is a tool that they specifically need, great. If not, we try to address whatever it is and for them. So with many of them, it may be, with some of them, it may not be, but we're trying to get around to each one. And I realize that KDE is contracted folks at PBIS, and you guys are ready and willing to help support and do what you're getting paid for. So we're going to try to figure out which of our districts really need your help that you're contracted for and which ones don't. And we'll try to use you guys as a tool.
And Jerry, thank you. I'm glad to hear your voice. Even though you said you usually try to stay quiet, so that was very helpful. I think that I think what I'm hearing is like, and I think I heard this from Megan. I don't know if she's still on, but the Carissa teams, some of them, not everyone, but need kind of an overview of PBIS, how to use a framework to align those supports. And so how could we do that? And then Jerry, from what you just said, that might then look like in Quebec, we have a few districts that really are, they're willing, they want to go through this process, and how could we then work with those districts alongside with our Carissa support and start to figure out how do our Carissa supports fit in to our supports we already have. So using those sites then as kind of our demo sites to work through. Because that's really where, in my experience, that building the capacity for training and coaching and technical assistance comes in, is when you're really working with districts, right? So there's only so much I feel like you can do in a training of, here's what content is. To build capacity, you have to be working with districts and schools. So how could we start with some overview trainings just to build general understanding and consensus, while you guys are also continuing to conduct those needs assessments with your districts, so you could then say, here's some districts we're going to engage with. And they might be some district leadership training, or it might be some school level tier 1 trainings. But then how could we use the school climate team and our supports to deliver those trainings and build the capacity of however that looks in your co-op, because I also know that looks different from co-op to co-op.
Just to give you an idea, we have 4 school districts out for the next 2 weeks because of the Delta variant and COVID. They're completely out and not in person. Also, to kind of quickly catch you up, when we talk about some of these needs and some of these levels, to give you an idea about special education teachers, just in 15 school districts alone, we have 61 MAT certified teachers. In other words, instead of just being fresh off the farm, off of a university or out of a university, out of a teacher education program, these folks were working in banks as a teller before school started this year. They were working in a department store at Walmart, and they're so short, the school districts are, in teachers, they've literally hired them off the street or out of a store. And now that encompasses 61 out of our 15 school districts that we're serving. That's their new special education teachers. So when you talk about PBIS and these three tiers, they didn't even have a grasp of an ARC meeting or an IEP, let alone what PBIS stands for. So that's the level that we're dealing with. And when we talk about those needs assessments, I don't know if a needs assessment you guys would develop would even go down that low as far as what they're specifically needing right now. And that's what I mean by taking the, if you will, a small town approach. You go to their school districts, meet with their administrative teams, and get with them. The last thing that they want to see right now is one of us on a Zoom and being at home while they're at school or in the office or something. So we try to make sure we're there. So the last thing we want to do is Zoom them in, because that's like pouring gasoline on the fire right now for the folks in the school districts.
Jerry, that's a good point. Like last year, like we all know we're struggling with getting new teachers. So last year, our new teacher cadre was overflowing, and we were thinking we would need to find new space this year. This year, we're struggling to fill it. Not that we need to fill it, but the numbers are down, and we were kind of looking around like what's happening, because they loved it last year. And that's what we're hearing is the people that need to fill those seats are afraid in general, right? This is a perception to come to a new teacher training because they're not ready for it. It needs to be more like, help, I'm not ready to teach, you know, like what you're talking about. And so that's a whole different perspective. Like I've signed up for teaching and not had a class, you know, technically they have, but they would be threatened to be in with new teachers. So it's a whole different world. That just like the pandemic, right? We're like, where are we living? And we started adjusting, and now these new conversations. And it's the other conversation that hit us hard besides that was with our PL consortium, K1 and 2 teachers are having a lot more issues because, and I saw some of those statistics last night, those students haven't been in school, and some have never been in school. And so, you know, a second grade teacher trying to keep pushing and, you know, that fine line of loving kids and pushing them and having high expectations, but it's so different for them. Like you look at a first grade teacher who is having kindergarten kids who've never been in a classroom, and the norms that have happened didn't happen for them because they haven't been in a classroom setting. And I saw the statistics last night, but it was like, you know, for a second grade student, their first normal year. Did anybody see that? It was like they had that out there. But anyway, it's that K1 and 2 teachers are like, for them, probably normal PBIS is going to look a lot different than even for people who have a strong background. Their frameworks look a lot different this year. Reality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, Jerry, just to reflect back, I thank you for sharing that. I know I live in Illinois, so our context is slightly different. I do not live in Kentucky, and I don't know that what you guys are going through. But I've talked with even some of the school climate team in the last couple of weeks and hearing some of those updates and the high levels of need there. So I don't want to say I totally get where your districts are and what their needs are. And I hope that we can help figure out how to support that. And some of our role might not be supporting even the same, like how can we help take and build some of your capacity, continue to build some capacity or offer some support so that your teams might provide different supports than we have the expertise to provide, or what our trainings might provide, right? Because we want to help build systems and teaming structures within schools, which might not always be the same as building the capacity of these teachers that aren't maybe having the same endorsements or the same level of training. But how could that help ease some of the supports that your teams are having to provide so you can help with some of that? I don't know what all that looks like. And unfortunately, I don't think any of us have ever navigated times where districts have this level of need. So,
Right. But if we go in there with the line that we're the government and we're here to help you, they're a whole lot more receptive if they see us in person.
Yes.
And we're there with them.
Yeah.
So that's what we're trying to do right now.
Okay. All right,
Okay.
Christina and Debbie, thoughts on, I know we're over time and I feel like we've had, I'm glad we extended and we heard more voices. Do you guys want to say some next steps?
Yeah, I wanted to thank everybody for hanging on with us, and I apologize for it going overtime. And I apologize for disappearing briefly. I missed a few minutes, but I heard a power saw outside, and then my electric went out for a minute. Not sure what happened yet, but so I may have missed a little bit of the conversation. But I think I would like to, after this meeting, kind of debrief with our consultants and with Christina and Katie and Kelly. And then I'm available to any of you guys if you have follow-up questions, or, if you want to give me a call or send an email or something, and then we can set up individual conversations after that and move forward that way, if that works for everybody. All right. Well, thank you all for being here, and thanks for the conversation. It was very, very helpful.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye. Katie?
Yeah.
I don't know, were you able to see the comments that